About this evening for our invitation. I like to make them short and to the point. Something that applies to me, especially since it's something that I have to kind of read through and study. So it's something I hope will apply to y'all also. But have you ever heard about somebody or saw somebody and rushed to a quick judgment on them? And one of those almost who hasn't. But I want to talk about somebody that that we've studied since we were little. We've always heard about him, but I've never really had a class much on him. Was listening to a lesson out of a fellow out of Mississippi, and he touched on this for a few minutes, and it kind of stuck with me. But there's a wee little man in the New Testament in Luke 19. His name's Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and like in Lyndall's class, we all know what the Jews thought of the tax collectors. They weren't liked very much because, in general, the tax collectors took advantage of their fellow Jews so that they could become wealthy, and they partnered with the Romans to hand off a bunch of money. Zacchaeus may not have been in that same position, though. He may not have been one of those people. So I read a few verses to you here. Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was short of stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained, saying, he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor, and if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. So Zacchaeus was a tax collector. I'm not saying he was perfect. He was a wealthy man, but he was not just a tax collector, he was the chief tax collector. But when Zacchaeus says, because we got a room full of engineers, when Zacchaeus says he'll give half of his wealth to the poor, take half of what he has, this is what he does. Zacchaeus gives half of his wealth to the poor, and if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. So if he was a cheat and a scoundrel like commonly thought of tax collectors, there's no way you can give half your wealth away and then return all those people that you cheated from fourfold. So something to think about. If he's willing to, he already says he gives half of his goods to the poor, and if he takes anything from someone by false accusation, he's going to restore it fourfold. More than likely, he's a pretty honest guy. There's a chance he may have gone into this field because he knew what the tax collectors were, and he didn't want his fellow Jews to be treated the way other tax collectors treat them. That kind of hit me when I heard this. You can't give more than what you have. That's just the way it is. So it for me, it made me rethink of Zacchaeus. He wasn't one of those people that he was a tax collector, he was a cheat, we don't need to do any more. The Holy Spirit thought enough of him, and in this event, we've got 9 verses dedicated to Zacchaeus. If he was a cheat and a scoundrel, probably wouldn't have had that much or not have his name mentioned in the Bible. But it kind of full turn here. sometimes we hear about people and you just assume, either from what they do for a living or I've heard stories, and you think, I don't need to hear anymore. So I thought of this and started thinking, I always thought of Zacchaeus as not such a good fellow, even though he said this. And then when you start looking and adding the numbers, he couldn't have been that bad. Never bothered to spend the time to kind of look at what all he says. In our present day lives, something to ponder. When you hear about people, especially when you hear out in the world, you hear somebody talking about somebody else, don't jump to conclusions too quick. Get to know those people. Get to go to the source. Get to know them and find out for yourself. It's so easy. It's the easy way to go ahead and make a rush decision on somebody that you've either don't know well, never met, or just are hearing stories from. So just a thought for the week as you do go through your week. If you do hear anything about folks, find out for yourself. Don't rush to judgment. And just like before I heard this, I put Zacchaeus in one of those. He's a tax collector. And then I started thinking about it. Said, well, he may have been a tax collector, but apparently he was one of the better ones, which says a bunch when he didn't have to be. So our thought for the evening, thought for the week, something to take with you. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation, now would be a good time we can offer up prayers. I don't think I see anybody here that's needing baptism. But if you need the prayers of the congregation, now's a good time to come forward while we stand and sing. There's a fountain free.